Tess of the D'Urbervilles is a 19th century novel by the English author Thomas Hardy. It underwent several revisions in production, largely due to what public morality in those days was prepared to tolerate, but it finally appeared in serial form in 1891. Nowadays, some Islamic cultures are rightly condemned for blaming rape on its victims, but in fact, Victorian England wasn't much different in that regard. Patricia Ingham's very good introduction to the Everyman edition covers those issues and more. I'm going to argue that this is a novel that, in terms of its principal theme, has been misunderstood. Yes, it's about class and sex and the malign way those two things intersected in England in the late 19th century, but I think it goes deeper than that. It's much more timeless. This review contains spoilers. It's about a 16-year-old peasant girl called Tess D'Urberville, who is emotionally blackmailed into visiting a rich widow called Mrs. D'Urberville to claim kinship, thereby hopefully improving her family's status. She encounters Mrs. D'Urberville's son, Alec, who gets her a job as his mother's poultry keeper, and then seduces and probably rapes her, although the details aren't given. She gives birth to a weak son, who no vicar will baptize, and who dies. She survives and finds work in a dairy, where she meets a well-to-do young farmer named Angel Clare, the son of a clergyman, and unlike Alec D'Urberville, apparently a man of principle. Angel and Tess fall in love and marry. However, on their wedding night, Angel confesses to having had an affair, and she tells him about Alec. Far from being as understanding as she's been, he's so shocked he immediately deserts her and goes abroad to start a new life. Half broken by now, Tess gets a new job working in the fields. Alec D'Urberville reappears, but she rejects him. Then her father dies, and the family's thrown into destitution, or it would be were it not for Alec, with whom she's forced to cohabit under the name Mrs. D'Urberville. Angel returns, having apparently been unable to forget Tess. She tells him it's too late, but then she changes her mind. She stabs Alec to death and goes on the run with Angel. They spend their last night together at Stonehenge, and when she awakes, she says, "I am ready." She's arrested, tried, and executed. Justice, in inverted commas, was done, the book's final paragraph says. The president of the Immortals, in the Aeschylean phrase, had ended his sport with Tess. So what's this novel saying? The clue is in the book's subtitle, A Pure Woman Faithfully Presented, which was apparently added late on, suggesting, if what I'm about to say is correct, that it wasn't so much invented as discovered, because I think Tess of the D'Urberville is chiefly a novel about different sorts of purity and the value of that term generally. Firstly, there's ethnic/racial purity. For Tess's family, D'Urberville is a name with a pedigree, assimilating them to one of the great bloodlines of English history since 1066. Of course, that's paradoxical because it's so obviously a French name, but it's also impossible because Alec's father adopted it to conceal his true social class. It's important that racial purity is demolished first because it rests on such farcical foundations. Next is Christian moral purity as represented by Angel Clare and the Church, and which falls down almost as completely. It's too transcendent to be of any practical value, and in the name of self-preservation, it tends towards a comprehensive, sanctimonious exclusivism. Then there's Tess herself, whose purity might best be described as immanent. Hardy deliberately applies a lot of pagan imagery to her. There's a sense in which, at least until she becomes Mrs. D'Urberville in the final section, she's a part of nature, and that particular purity can't be compromised. The murder's a turning point. Her immanence and Angel's transcendence come together in what Walter Benjamin later called divine violence. There's a fourth form of purity here, represented in their being on the run from the law, their last night at Stonehenge, and her willing embrace of death. I don't know what to call it. That's one way of looking at Tess. Another way is that she demonstrates the incoherence of the very notion of purity. Or perhaps, ultimately speaking, purity is something that can't be understood in earthly categories, even the conventional religious ones. We can get some inkling of its otherworldly nature, but it can only be shown, not described. Those are just a few of the possibilities, but don't take my word for it. Read the book.